Hi. In the last few lectures, we split the data into train and test datasets. Then we used the train dataset to come up with the suitable dummy variables for our statistical model. In fact, this makes perfect sense because we are going to use the train dataset to build our model and the test set to test it. But in order to test the model in the test set, we must have the same dummy variables as the ones in the train set. Fortunately, we can easily use the code we've written for the train set. As you can probably remember, in the beginning, before we started exploring and pre-processing the data, we assigned the train data frame to a new working data frame. That is, we assigned df inputs pre-processing to be equal to lone data inputs train. From then on, we worked with the df inputs pre-processing to assess weight of evidence by variable and to create dummy variables based on our assessment. When we finished this task, the df inputs preprocessing data frame contained all the old data and the newly created corresponding dummy variables. So that means we can use the same code to create the same dummy variables for the test data frame. Now, the test data frame is used only to test and assess a model estimated on the training data. Therefore, when working with the test data frame, we don't need to assess weight of evidence or come up with categories we consider best to create dummy variables. Rather, we must create the exact same dummy variables we used to train the model. Okay, we can effortlessly do that by assigning df inputs preprocessing to be equal to lone data inputs test instead of lone data inputs train, and then rerun the whole code. Please note that weight of evidence will be calculated and visualized. However, we don't care about them, since calculating and visualizing weight of evidence does not make any changes in the data at all. We'll simply ignore the outputs of these steps. There is one thing, however, we should do before starting. As we mentioned, after running the code with the train data frame, df inputs preprocessing contains all the variables needed to train the model. If we only assigned a new value to this data frame, as we should in order to run all the same calculations with the test data, we'd overwrite the variables created for training the model. That's why, before we go back up there, where we started our preprocessing, it is important to save the train dataset. Therefore, let lone data inputs train equal df inputs preprocessing. Now the data frame lone data inputs train and the data frame df inputs preprocessing both contain the preprocessed training set data. Okay, so now we can go up here and make data frame df inputs preprocessing equal to lone data inputs test. Of course, we have to make data frame df targets preprocessing equal to lone data targets test as well. Next, we can simply run the code all the way up to where we made lone data inputs train equal df inputs preprocessing. Thus, df inputs preprocessing contains the test dataset with all the dummy variables needed for the model. Hence, instead of lone data inputs train, we make lone data inputs test equal to df inputs preprocessing. Consequently, data frames lone data inputs train and lone data inputs test contain the train and the test datasets with all dummy variables needed for the model. At the same time, lone data targets train and lone data targets test contain the corresponding outputs. Great job! That was much easier than expected, wasn't it? All the preprocessing for our pre-D model is completed. I suggest we export these data frames and store them in CSV files. From the next section, we will begin modeling using only the pre-processed CSVs. Good job, and thanks for watching.